Hall of Fame broadcaster Marty Brenneman here, and he's the best storyteller in the game, and it's time to sit back, relax, and have some laughs. Welcome to the Mayor's Office, and here's your host, Sean Casey.
Boom, Chichi. We're back in it, baby.
Here
We're
we
back in
go.
it, man.
We are on fire, man. Big guests these last few weeks. Dan Plesac was awesome. Gary Sheffield's awesome, but we're going in a little bit of a different direction, but still awesome today, right?
Well, dude, this is the guy coming on today is one of my dear friends, you know, kind of a mentor in my life, but really one of my good friends. You know, it's funny because we always talk about, you know, what I love about this podcast, Chinch, is, you know, all the guests that we have and the hero's journey that they're on. You know, I like to dive into the mindset. What was your mindset as a player? What was your mindset growing up? Who were some people that influenced you? You know, I always think about when you get to that elite level, you're thinking differently, right? These guys are thinking at a different level. You know, to be the consistency, the process, focusing on the task at hand, and all that stuff. You know, and you know, I look back. Harvey Dorfman was a guy for me that was like my mental coach in the big leagues.
You talk about it almost every episode. You bring
exactly.
that
we talked with Al Leiter about it. You know, so many guys. Greg Maddox leaned on that guy because we, you know, to ask how do we get proper perspective and all that stuff. Well, you know, it's funny now at 47 in my life. You know, I'm always looking for people to help me to guide me to that next level, of mindset, that next level of my life. You know, looking for guys that have done it and are coaching it, right? So this guy for me, man, is that guy. And, you know, this guy he's a life coach. He's an author, wrote an awesome book. So recommended if you go get it. The New Man Emerging. So good. Such a great book. He's a one-on-one fulfillment coach. He also has this thing called Find Your Tribe. It's a men's online group coaching. But bro, I did it. I did it for 12 weeks.
Did you? Nice.
Yeah, bro. Unbelievable online group. And what's funny is the dude's getting too popular that, you know, it keeps selling out. So if you hear this, go freaking sign up as quick as you can, and we'll give you places to sign up there. He also has this thing called the Vital Guide, which is growth-minded epic retreats out in Montana, which I was supposed to go on last year, but I freaking ran into some COVID. Like literally the day before I left, I'm like, COVID hit. I'm like, DeSanti, I can't make it. So it's unbelievable. So yeah, without further ado, let's bring in my man, my mentor, my great friend, Michael DeSanti. What's up, brother?
Oh man, what's up? What is up? What a great meeting, man. I really appreciate being here.
Well, dude, I was telling you before. You know, did you ever think that you would be protecting Gary Sheffield in the lineup? Because Chef was our guest last week, and Michael DeSanti's coming in the 4-hole. You know what I mean? So
and this is like my little league dream, bro.
I love it, dude. So how's it going, man? Where are you? And well, you know, tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now.
I live in sunny Miami with my wife and our little dog. And I've been down here for 5 years, I think. It's about 5 years, from New Jersey, born and raised in New Jersey, and then started my coaching company almost 15 years ago. Wow. And then when I met my wife, she works at the University of Miami Hospital. And so it's her dream job. I actually was her coach years ago.
I love that too.
And then
you're like, hey, let's get married. What do you think? I know I'm coaching here, all that stuff. Maybe we start dating.
You want to extend this contract? Let's just make this open-ended. So moved down here. We did a year long distance, and then I moved down here, and now we're loving life in sunny Miami.
Well, dude, before we get going, it's funny, like, you know, how we had the connection. My girlfriend, Sarah, and you obviously connected years ago. And, you know, she was in the wellness program and, you know, opened up her own wellness facility. You guys went to IIN together, all that stuff, which was a pretty cool connection. And another cool connection was down there in Miami. You were talking one day just randomly. You were like, oh, yeah, I just went to dinner with, you know, Mark Megna. And it was so funny. Mark Megna owns these gyms called Anatomy down in Miami. Some of the best gyms probably in the country. But Megna and I went to Richmond together, University of Richmond. He was a killer, and I was like, Mark Megna, like University of Richmond, and I don't think you knew he went to Richmond. Like, I'm not sure, bro. I'm like, go tell Mark Megna tomorrow you know Sean Casey.
I was at dinner with Megna, and I told a story about you, but I never used your name.
Right.
So he was like, wow, that's an amazing story. And then the next day, I think you and I connected. And I was like, yeah, I told a story to this guy, met Mark Magna last night. And you're like, bro, we were boys together in college. And then the next day I ran into him. I was like, that story I told you, that was about Sean Casey. He's like, Sean Casey? I'm so serious. His face lit up and he was like, is he still the same? Is he still know everybody? I was like, bro, I've got a story for every scenario, and he knows everyone on the street.
So great, dude. So great. And also, if you don't follow Mark Magna, you should, because this guy he was a killer in high school. I mean, he was a killer in college. The hardest worker maybe I've ever seen. You know, you go in the weight room and you're like, dude, Magna's doing 10 times 10 that everyone else is doing. You got to be kidding me. And looking at him now, like how successful he is and, you know, how jacked he is still, you know what I mean? But he's such a great dude. I was on his podcast a few weeks back. Check it out. It's called the Magnum Method. I believe you were on it too. But just a great dude. It just, what a small world. That's what I mean. Like, it's amazing how, you know, we've connected and you're connected with him and you know, all the workout programs and all that stuff. And, you know, just really cool. But dude, I think one thing, you know, for our listeners, man, you know, your story's really cool. Your hero's journey, you know, how you got to where you're at and, you know, going down the path that you went down. So can you take us back, man, to like Michael DeSanti as a kid? And I know the journey starts there, right? Probably pre-teen of how things get going. And I knew you were a great Little League player too. And I guess becoming a big leaguer wasn't your thing, but take us back, bro, to Michael DeSanti as that young kid back in Jersey.
So, you know, it really, I mean, sports were a huge part of my life. Typically, or mostly baseball and basketball, right? So as a kid, those were, I don't know if you can relate to this, but as a kid, sports were like my therapy. Oh. That was my outlet, right? So baseball and basketball. Now, what happened was, like, I have two older brothers and we were all gifted athletes. So as a kid, I was a really gifted athlete in baseball and basketball, and I couldn't even play with kids my own age. I had to play with the kids above me, still be like captain, MVP, right? So most of my life growing up was, my whole identity was around sports. Then what happened was, when I was around 14, my brother and I were being recruited to play basketball for a prep school, and I was at their summer camp and I tore ligaments in my ankle. So I was bedridden. 2 weeks later, my father and my mother divorced, or they separated and they left. And my oldest brother went away to college, all within like 2 weeks. Wow. So my whole foundation and identity as a kid just blown to bits. So here I am, like, bedridden, and my father's gone, my brother's gone, and it's the middle of the summer. I'm like, who am I? Like, I'm having an existential crisis at 14. So what started to happen was, I really didn't know who I was outside of an athlete. That was who I was. It's how everyone knew me. That was my popularity as a kid. And now here I am, bedridden. But what I started to do is, I started to, like, really have this, no joke, existential crisis. So I started reading and really, like, getting into Emerson and Thoreau and the Tao Te Ching and all these, like, deep spiritual texts. And I'm like 14. Oh. Yeah, it was like this pivotal moment in my life. So that became, so here's what I did. And now looking back on it, I could see and put together a lot more pieces. But what happened was, when I was playing sports and I was playing ball and I was moving up in ranks and in leagues, other kids or other parents of kids were getting upset. Like, how come he can play with them and my kid can? And how come he? And so it started to create all this politic and disruption. Then you take on top of that, my parents splitting up. And I didn't realize this at the time, but my reaction to all this chaos in my life was, I just quit everything. Wow. I just shut down, withdrew. You know what? If you're unhappy, I'll make you happy. I'll dim my own light, so to speak. I'll play small. You know what? I'll just quit. That'll help. That'll make everyone happy. So what I did was, I just quit everything. All these passions of mine, sports and you name it, school, bro, just mentally checked out everything. And that was, looking back on it, that was my reaction to a lot of what was going on in my life, all this turmoil that was going on in my life. Now, I still stayed connected to, mental health and mindset and deep inner work and spiritual work. And so what happened was I ended up, going through college and, my early 20s. And then I got into the work or the corporate world. And I started to put all this deeper work, I started to put it on hold to go make money, because I got this great job 3 days out of college being groomed to take over my uncle's company. And I didn't come from a lot of money. So this was like a huge carrot on a stick. I mean, this was like, put some hard work in for a decade and your whole financial future is made. So I went through that, and my uncle, who's like a father to me, he was like my father, but with money. I was like, this is it, man. Like I figured it out. But what I started to realize was the more responsibility I got, the more stress, the more money I got, the more trapped I felt. And so I spent my 20s like suppressing this part of me that really made me come alive and really helped me during challenging times. And then I was just stressed out. And then what happened was a few events happened, but it really illuminated my eyes to like, you know what? I'm not really making an impact in my life or anyone else's life. I'm just chasing, this financial carrot on a stick. And then in my mid 30s, I was stressed out. I was working. I left that job to start, my own coaching company, but I was still living paycheck to paycheck or client to client. My father passed away and I was going through a divorce. And I was like,
why are these nuclear bombs keep coming into my life?
so that exactly. And I was like, wait a second. I've been studying and, researching and diving into this stuff since I was 14. How are these the results in my life? And what I actually started to find was, since I was 14 to mid 30s, I was flirting with doing the inner work. I preferred it. I skirted the issue. I did it when it was convenient, but my results in life were showing me like, you know what? You're not fully committed to it. And so in my mid 30s, when my life was kind of blowing up again, I just fully committed into doing deeper inner work on myself, because I kept having results in finances and relationships and health all show up that were showing me like, yo, this is incongruent to what you say you really want. And that moment, or that year, probably the most challenging year, that rock bottom of my life, was actually when I was like, you know what, I'm going to pause and I'm going to fully commit to really focusing and correcting my inner world so that my results that show up are congruent to it. And that was like a huge pivotal moment in my life. And now, I mean, I pinch myself every day I wake up that this is the life I get to live, the relationship, the marriage that I'm in, my financial health, my physical health. But that took years of really diving in deep to doing more inner work or contextual work.
I think that's an unbelievable story, because I think the first part of your story is the American dream. Hey man, go out, slay the dragon, make as much money as you can, do whatever you want, party, make it happen, and you'll find happiness. And it's like, wow. There's not only have I not found happiness, I found a lot of anxiety, I found a lot of stress, I found some depression, I found some things that I really, really didn't want. You know what I mean? And so, like, I want to go back there really quick, Mikey, because I think that's one thing I think probably we all struggle with in life is like, what are you chasing? You know what I mean? What is it that, what fulfillment are you really looking for? And like for you, if you look back at the American dream in your 20s, they'd be like, oh, Mike DeSanti's he's set, dude. He's set,
Listen, on paper, my life was as good as it gets, because I didn't come from money. And now in my mid 20s, I own my own home. I'm driving the Mercedes Benz. I'm traveling the world. I'm living on expense accounts. Like, dating beautiful women. All my friends were like, how did you step into this, just fall into this? And as an image or as a facade, dude, I nailed it. But internally, I felt trapped. I was depressed. I was anxious. I gained weight. My health was tragedy. And then when I looked ahead, I was like, wait, this is not sustainable. I mean, I'm headed towards like ill health or ruin here. And I'm only in my 20s and I'm having these issues. Wow. So to your point, I think what is a huge distinction that needs to be made is most of us, and that's why I coach men, I would say especially men, the blueprint we're given is go be successful, which typically means like go earn a lot of money. And then that's going to fix everything else. And I've seen it so often, and we've proven it so often. We're like, you see these men, they achieve these great pinnacles of success, right, financially or athletic or whatever it is. But then like their health is destroyed along the way, or their children don't speak to them, or their marriage is in shambles. And so what happens is I think we're given this blueprint for success, which then says, once you reach this, everything else gets fixed. So the way I distinguish this, and I think this is really important, we've got to distinguish success from fulfillment, because those are two totally different things. And the basis of those are what I call domains. Okay, a domain in life is anything that requires love and attention. So your health is a domain, your marriage is a domain, your financial life is a domain, your spiritual life is a domain, your relationship your relationship with your children, these are all domains in life. And success is a particular achievement or an accomplishment in a particular domain, right? So success is, all right, in this domain, in my financial life, I've accomplished something. Or in my health, I ran a marathon, I accomplished something. That's success. It's an achievement in a particular domain. But fulfillment is a whole different focus and energy. Fulfillment is when all the domains of my life receive the appropriate amount of love and attention, so that I now work on being dynamic, of being a dynamic man or being a dynamic person, where I can give love and attention to my marriage. I could give the appropriate amount of love and attention to my finances and my career, the appropriate amount of love and attention to my health, my physical health, my spiritual health, my leisure life, our travel life, our adventure life. That's a whole different blueprint. And I don't think many Americans, or many, especially men in America, have ever been given that blueprint. So we're always focused or over-focused on success. And then we're wondering, how did I achieve this and something's still missing?
Right. And I also that's it's amazing stuff, dude. I'm so grateful that you're on here, because this is so much stuff that like us as men, even women out there, we all need to hear, and I think one of the things like that, shoots into my mind as you talk like that is that growth versus fixed mindset, I think sometimes in baseball too, I know, I always tell guys, hey, listen, if you have a fixed mindset, I think fixed mindset people are like, you can only play when things are going well, right? If things are going well, I do well. But if things start to go haywire and I have failure, man, I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to recover or respond, right? And I think I hear so much about the growth mindset, about what you're talking about here, about making adjustments, pivoting, responding differently, recovering. Results aren't random, right? Like you got to be able to look at your life and make that adjustment. Can you talk about that a little bit? Growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and obviously how for me how it relates to baseball, but also how it relates to life at this stage.
Sure. I mean, to go a step further back, I talk to you about this all the time, is a lot of the work that I've done, there's a simple formula that I use, and it's context generates content. So what that means is environment generates what shows up in that environment. Like a cactus grows in the desert. The desert is context. The desert's the environment. So what shows up in that environment is totally congruent to it. So our context is our inner world. So what a lot of human beings do, what a lot of men and women do is, we live in the North Pole, but we really want a cactus. And I'm like, well, it's never going to happen. I mean, you could. And then what we do, though, we're such a funny, bizarre species. But we're like, all right, you know what? That cactus I planted in the North Pole, that didn't work. Let me plant 10 of them. Let me plant 100 of them. You know what? I'll plant this one in August. Maybe that one will take. And I'm like, listen, man, until you've cultivated the right or the correct environment, your efforts are actually futile. So when we start to shift from external to internal and look more contextually, now we can start to see is like, hold on, what are my results showing me or revealing to me about my inner world, my belief systems, my habits, my processes, my behaviors, my narratives, my limiting beliefs? What are my results showing me? Because just like you just said, results aren't random. Now, what you're asking here too is if part of my inner world, my context is a fixed mindset, that is going to majorly limit me because it's always going to make me reactive to what's happening. And a fixed mindset and reactivity, if you think of the word react, it's to act again from the past. That's what reaction is, or reactivity. So with a fixed mindset, with a reactive mindset, I'm always operating from a limitation from my history. So if things are going smooth and well, I know how to perform. But at the moment that tide or that weather changes, I'm going to still be reactive to my history, old beliefs, old narratives, old habits, old reflexes. I'm always going to be limited to that. And I won't be able to respond in this present moment to, hey, listen, the tide has changed. The weather's changed. The wind has changed. I want to now, what growth mindset does is growth mindset brings me to the present moment so I can respond to what's actually happening here and now. I can make adjustments here and now. And that's a whole different process. What that does is, or let's say the work of that or the challenge of that is to really examine what are those old belief systems and patterns that are keeping me fixed. How do I become aware of them, adjust them, correct them to take new committed or inspired actions so that now I generate new possibility in the present and the future moving forward?
That's so funny because for me, what Sean just said, he's comfortable when things are going well, whatever. I am the complete opposite. Like, I am so much better with a gun to my head when the whole world is just failing all around me. I am comfortable in the chaos. You mentioned chaos before. That's probably what drew me to being like a live producer of live events where I can just react. What kills me is when I have 3 days of nothing going on. I get so inside my head. So you're looking at two people right here on the screen who literally are more comfortable in two different forms. So how do you talk to the two of us in the same room at the same time? And what do I need to do to kind of get the boring days to not be scary days for me, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. I just had this, excuse me. I just had this conversation with a client yesterday. And what was happening, I'll just briefly, is he's building this really successful company. And what happens is the mundane or those boring days like you talked about, he's procrastinating. He's not doing exactly what he needs to be doing, X, Y, or Z. And so what happens is he's putting himself under self-inflicted pressure. And then he's narrating to himself, I work better under pressure because, and then boom, boom, now he throws his Superman cape on, digs himself out of his own self-inflicted hole, and then gets up and he's like, now we're good. And so I had asked him, I was like, listen, look back in your history. Tell me about a little bit of your upbringing. And he's like, oh, it's pure chaos. I'm like, that makes sense. Because here's what happens. As human beings, we don't default to what's healthy. We default to what's familiar. So if chaos is part of that context growing up, or narratives that I've told myself I work better under pressure, I'm actually going to struggle in the mundane. I'm going to struggle in the process of mastery or 1% improvement, but I will thrive in I'm under the gun. Everybody look out, get out of my way, make it happen. Well, here's the thing. That's appropriate in certain regards. And then it becomes inappropriate or unhealthy past a certain threshold. Where we become dynamic is where we're able to identify, okay, where my strengths are in chaos, but where am I self-inflicting that chaos? Those aren't the same thing. And they become, one is a gift and a skill, the other is a hindrance and a liability. Because now what will happen is when things are going really well, let me just light this Molotov cocktail, throw it in my life, self-sabotage everything because I've got the behavioral pattern of doing well or operating in chaos. But that's actually not that often. Life isn't throwing us chaos constantly. Most of it is actually unconsciously self-inflicted. So if I could start to distinguish that and say, okay, I know my skill set is when, we're in the trenches, it's wartime and chaos is happening. Great. Let me distinguish that. But let me also, when life is boring or mundane, let me master and advance the mundane by simple protocols, simple habits that are improving me over and over and over again, even if it's just by a fraction. That's where we become dynamic again, because we can put those two ways of operating together. But if you default to one or the other, you're just going to do what's familiar. And then that becomes like that old saying, if all I have is a hammer, everything's going to look like a nail. So if all I know is I'm good in chaos, I'll create it.
That's interesting.
And so now to be dynamic is to say, you know what, I have a toolkit that when I need the hammer, I take it out. When I need the rose, I take that out. And those are two totally different energies.
You talked about the simple part. That's so good, man. So good. You talked about the simple part. What are some things that you could do daily that would help with that? You know what I mean? Like that you're creating that new process for yourself, that new protocol.
Yeah.
Well, what are some of the things you do, or what would you suggest to your clients?
A lot of times what I'll do is I'll have my clients reverse engineer. So what I'll do is what's the greater vision? What's the greater purpose that you really want? And so what I call that, I call this, as an acronym, I call this VMaps. So what I do is like, what is that greater vision? V in VMaps is for vision. What's the greater purpose? What's the bigger why you want to do this? So let's say I have a big goal in my physical health. Well, what's really underneath that you really want? What's the experience that you want to generate in yourself or in other people? So let's say that greater vision is, I want energy and vitality. All right, great. That's the vision. Now, underneath that, as we reverse engineer it, what's the mission? Meaning, what's the specific quantifiable goal? Oh, the mission in my health is I want to lose, 10 pounds. Oh, great. That's specific and quantifiable. The vision can be vague, but the mission has to be specific because the mission is the mile marker. That's what I'm actually, quantifying. Underneath mission, we start to go into action. What's the action? Meaning, what are the things I need to start doing, stop doing, increase or decrease? Oh, okay. So for this goal in my health, what do I need to start doing or stop doing? Okay, I'm going to start doing an anti-inflammatory diet. I'm going to eliminate sugar, alcohol, grains, anything inflammatory. Great. That's the action. It's something different that I'm doing in my process right now. The P in VMaps is for plans. Plans are actions with a time element. So by when are you going to start that action and for how long? Oh, okay, I'm going to eat this anti-inflammatory diet starting Monday, and I'm going to do it for 30 days and reassess after 30 days. That's the plan. It's an action with a time element to it. And then S is for systems. Systems are protocols that are doable and achievable so that they're repeatable. And this is where a lot of people trip up. So a system is a protocol. Remember, it's got to be doable and achievable so that it's repeatable. Oftentimes people make their systems too big.
So big, yeah.
So that the first time they blow it, they're like, wow, I'm just disappointed. I guess I'm no good at this. And then they abandon the whole thing. So if I say, this is my health vision, vitality, the mission is lose 10 pounds. The action is anti-inflammatory diet. The plan is for 30 days starting Monday. Then the system is, okay, every Sunday I go to the market, I get all my food for the week, prep it on Sunday, and I make sure everything's divvied out for the week so that every day I'm setting myself up in a system or in protocols that are doable and achievable so I could repeat them for those 30 days. We've got to make our systems doable and achievable. Now, what happens is this starts to bring together, the big picture visionary thinkers that operate really well with the big goals. And then it also brings together my expert personalities like, no, just give me the details. You're now giving awareness to all of these functions of this goal. You're saying this is the greater goal. Great. What do I do today? What's the greater goal? Great. What do I execute today? And there's this great philosophy out of Zen Buddhism called Kaizen. And this just points to exactly what I'm talking about with VMaps. Kaizen says, what's the greater vision of your life? Contemplate it, explore it. And once you get clear on it, let it go. And then, because what happens is a lot of times people look at their future, they look at the greater vision and purpose of their life, and they either get overwhelmed by it or paralyzed by it. Overwhelmed by it will lead to paralysis, or some people be like, you know what? I'm just going to head down, bull in a china shop, I'm gonna, burn bridges and get to it. I'm like, they're both unconscious. So what Kaizen says is focus on that end goal, contemplate it, consider it, and then let it go and take all that energy to here and now and advance your state, even if it's by an inch, day after day after day. Because what ultimately Kaizen is saying is as you grow that greater version of yourself, it naturally leads you to that blueprint that you were envisioning in your future anyway. So it starts to unwind that overwhelm and starts to unwind that paralyzation. It says like, okay, that's where I want to be. What do I do today? How do I advance my state today? What do I improve today? Even if it's just by 1%, 1 inch. Over time, that's what what I call mastering the mundane. If you master the mundane, you are now putting in foundations that will always lead to greater accomplishments.
It's amazing, when you talk about mastering the mundane. It's funny, like, I've kind of, over the last couple of years that mundane has become like something I look forward to so much, getting up early in the morning before the kids get up 5:30 or whatever, even if it's a 5-minute meditation, making sure I do it. So, it could be 20 minutes one day, but 5 minutes, I know I'll show up. 5 minutes of journaling, I know I'm going to show up. It might be 20 minutes, but 5 minutes, I know I can do. You know what I mean? Right. 10 minutes on the Peloton, it might be 30, but I know I can do 10. And it's funny when I go back to my career, brother Len, and I don't even think I totally understood it then as I do now. That mundane of, when you play 162 games in 180 days, bro, some of the people, the veterans, when I first came up was like, they just kept saying, find a routine. I didn't understand. I'm like, what do you mean? What's that mean? And eventually I was like, oh my gosh, my routine turned out to be the most important thing for me when I was playing. And part of my routine was, hey, get to the yard at the same time. Bam, familiarity there. I'd show up, I'd get dressed, I'd go maybe grab something to eat. I'd go hit in the batting cages. Then next thing you know, I'm out at batting practice. I would hit there, do some tee work, come back in, relax a little bit. At 6 o'clock for a 7:05 game, I'm in a quiet area where I could I sat down and did a breathing technique. I used to read the Bible because it would give me perspective. Like, hey man, this isn't the end of the world. It's perspective. And I would read Harvey Dorfman's book, The Mental Game of Baseball, and I would just read a paragraph or a sentence. But I did it every day, brother. And it created that. That's what I mean. It created that soul force. It created something that, like, man, this is starting to feel bigger than me. And when I walked out of that room, Mikey, it was like, wow, I feel like a switch flipped for me. And then when I walked out at 7:05, I'm like, man, I'm ready to play. And I feel that way with life now. When I do my routine in the morning, it's like, man, I'm ready for the day. You know?
Yeah, I actually relate to Rich quite a bit because I told you about my history. It was so chaotic. I got used to that. I used to think when things were mundane, like something was wrong. So I was very similar. I would just self-sabotage things. So mastering the mundane was something I actually really had to exercise later in life. And exactly what you're saying is what you started to do here, Case, is you started to put purpose to the little protocols. Because you're like, oh, who cares what time I get to the ball field? It matters. Who cares if I read the Bible? It matters. Who cares if I do? It matters. And what starts to happen, you're like, wait, there's an overriding in the brain that begins to happen because we think, or typically in our mindsets and our brains, big results only come from big efforts. And that's not true.
Right.
Big results actually come from small efforts consistently over time, and then they compound. So what you're saying here is, wait, what's the protocol? What are the systems? How do I strengthen the foundation so that whatever comes on top of it, I'm prepared for it. I'm ready for it. That's what, like, even for me and for Rich, we were, talking here is like, if my foundation is strong, when the chaos comes, when the changing weather comes, I'm already prepared for it. I already am solid. I have all of my routines down. I just go now and execute my protocols. And that's a whole different way of operating than this. Whatever comes, I'll just figure it out when I get there. I'm like, I don't know. As a Major League Baseball player, I'm not sure that's the your skill set's only going to take you so far. Like, I don't know if that's the best route for going through pro sports or even life.
Yeah. How about like this pertains to this too? What about the narratives that we tell ourselves all the time? I think, hey, that's just who I am. Hey, that's just the way I do it. Hey, I'm Irish, so we go to the bar all the time. Hey, I'm Italian, so we crush pasta every day. And we're, seriously, like, we're big cooks. You know what I mean? Like, all this stuff. Or just, hey, man, that's just who I am. I just get angry, man. I got that temper. I've always had that temper. And I used to say that stuff to myself too. But then I'm like, man, how's that working for you? Like, so yeah. How do you change narratives that we get in our heads where we just start to spiral? We go down that maze of, here I go again. I'm going down to this same thinking pattern, and neurons have wired together all these years of just, and then telling myself, that's just the way I do it. So can you speak on that a little bit of narratives? How do we change the narratives in our mind?
Well, the biggest thing is first identifying it. And to define a narrative are the things that we tell ourselves, about people, about life, or about the world. Okay, so narratives are the things we tell ourselves about ourselves. I'm not good enough. I don't have what it takes. That's just who I am. These are narratives we're telling ourselves or about people. People aren't to be trusted. X people are this way, X people are that way, or about life or about the world. Like, life is hard. That's just the way it is, right? So here's the thing. We live from these narratives. And we pick these narratives up when we're young. A big part of where we pick our narratives up are from our parents, but we pick them up from our community, our mother, father, teacher, preacher, all of that. When we're young and we're building our worldview, we're picking up these narratives. We're learning them when we're young. But the challenge is we're picking these narratives up when we're young, and we just bring them into adulthood without ever questioning them, without ever challenging them, without ever interrupting them. And it leads into exactly what you just said. It leads into a fixed mindset of, it's just the way I am. It's just the way life is. Just the way people are. It's just the way relationships are. It's just the way marriage is. Just the way, fill in the blank. And so what people don't realize is that narratives generate behaviors. And so many people could actually see, this behavior for me over here is unhealthy. And they try to change or improve the behavior without contextually going underneath to what the narrative that's creating it. So if you think about one narrative, life is hard. If you have one narrative that you are committed to being right about, life is hard, I guarantee you are going to unconsciously produce life is hard results. And you're going to actually remember, context generates content. So context is narrative belief system. Content is behavior, reaction, habit. So you can't have life is hard beliefs and narratives and have life is easy results. It will never happen. So what will happen is when life is easy or when life is going smoothly, I will actually implode it to make it hard to be right about my limiting beliefs and narratives. So what happens is now, to your question, how do we change that? In order to change a behavior, we first must address or become aware or self-aware of what's the narrative underneath. And that is a whole practice in self-awareness, meaning, what am I telling myself about this? What am I telling myself about this event, about this person, about who I am, about this relationship, about these results? And as we begin to self-examine what's the narrative, what am I telling myself about relationships? Like, if you think about, if you have a narrative about people aren't to be trusted, or women aren't to be trusted, or men can't be trusted, and you go into a relationship, you are going to bring major skepticism to that relationship, and they're never going to feel trusted. And then they're going to do things that you're like, yep, see, here you go. I was right.
Well, can I jump in on that real quick? Because what about narratives, that are placed against you? Forget about your internal narrative. So I'll just use the example. There are probably a lot of people out there who what you just said makes total sense for them and would help them. But they look at you and say the false narrative of, this guy just wants my money. Or in business, for me, there have been times where I've always said, I'm like, they're creating a false narrative against me. That's always been a thing in business and in companies I've worked, where I'm like, and maybe it's internalized, but a lot of times it's like, that person doesn't want you to be a certain way. They're going to take you down. So how do you're talking about internalizing, how do you externalize it, and how do you defend against those things?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, there's a simple truth in life where, cats meow, dogs bark, and people judge. That's
great. That's true.
Human beings are interpretation machines. So when I used to do, pre-COVID, when I would do public speaking and have rooms of hundreds of people, like, there was 100 different interpretations of me. I don't control that, because what happens is people's interpretations are their filters. It's the way they're filtering the world or filtering you, Rich, in that moment. Oh, I don't trust this guy because he's got a beard. That has nothing to do with my character.
Right.
Zero. So where my control and my focus is still always on my own authenticity, knowing people are going to have their interpretations, their judgments, their critiques about me. But where my power is, I'm not allowing myself or my reactivity to fall into that trap and then limit who I am based on some external filter, some external judgment, or even some external critique. It's like the saying, if you're dependent upon people's praise, you're going to fall with their criticism. And so what happens is, now for me, as contextually, I'm now saying, okay, I could distinguish between, I know my intention, I know my authenticity, I know that what I'm doing is pure in intention, and they are also free to interpret it however they want. Because if now I go into, let's say, my default or my context, think of it this way. if I have the narrative, it's my job to make people happy, and someone doesn't like what I'm doing, I'll actually suppress and play down what I'm doing to please them. And now I'm trapped in that old reactivity and fixed mindset again. Oh, you don't like what I'm doing? Here, let me explain it better. Let me do this. Let me make sure you're okay. And this was a huge part of my upbringing, a huge part of what I needed to heal, was that default to peacemaking and people pleasing. And that was just like, I will just default to, unless you're happy, something's wrong.
Yeah, and I'm not doing a good job. I'm not doing a good job.
Yeah.
When you're taking somebody else, you're taking their mind and putting it in your head. When I do that all the time.
Yeah, so what here we're starting to reveal is the narrative of, if they're upset, I'm doing a bad job, or it's my job to make them happy. That's not true at all. My job is to know my own value, communicate that value, and then let people choose how they want to relate to that value. So if someone says, oh, you're too expensive, you're too this, oh, okay, that's cool. I just move on to the next person. Or someone says, hey, I disagree with you. Yeah, that's cool. All right. Like there's a whole, I won't compromise who I am based on that external narrative of, which trust me, I had to overcome in a big way, because that became, in the chaos of my youth, my role became, how do I make the whole family happy? How do I bring people back together? I became the peacemaker. And I didn't understand that until I was later in life, where I realized, in order to make everyone happy, I was compromising my health. I was compromising my sanity. I was compromising boundaries. I was compromising all these things that actually led to my own inner worth. I was like, depleted, and people still weren't happy. And I was like, I'm doing all this, I'm making all these efforts, everyone's still miserable. What's going on here? Because that's what I was saying. In my 30s, everything was just imploding. And I'm like, it wasn't due to a lack of effort. It was due to a lack of accuracy. I was inaccurate with my energy. I was inaccurate with my effort. I was doing everything to make people happy, and it kept imploding in my face. And so going back to the question case, like, first, we've got to become aware of the narrative. What am I telling myself, about people, about life, about the world? Once I'm aware of it, that's the 50-yard line. But awareness and $4 will get you a cup of coffee. It's not enough. I know a lot of people that are really aware, but they're still doing the same thing over and over again. So awareness is the 50-yard line. But now here becomes the formula: awareness plus a new committed action. That gets us into the end zone. So what we're saying here is the formula is, now that I see it, now what? What am I going to do about it? Oh, I notice in my relationship, women aren't to be trusted. I notice that's what's happening. I notice that's the narrative. What's a new committed action I get to make in my relationship? I get to be vulnerable. I get to be honest. I get to express how I'm feeling. I get to actually take a risk. I notice in my finances, we grew up, especially our generation grew up, our parents constantly tell us money doesn't grow on trees. And all that. What's the narrative? Like, there's not enough. All right, I'm noticing there's not enough. So now that I see that narrative, what's a new committed action, a new inspired action that I could take? Like, you know what? There is enough, and I'm going to take certain X amount of money. I'm going to invest it, and I'm going to be patient with it. I'm going to watch it grow. These are new committed actions, and the actions, conscious actions, committed actions, will start to override and challenge those old narratives. But if you just keep the narratives and just commit to being right about the narratives, they keep us in a fixed mindset, and there's no growth or possibility. If I'm just committed to being right about that narrative. But if I can illuminate that narrative and then take a new action on top of it, it starts to override that narrative. Think of it this way. If I have the narrative, I'm afraid of heights, And then and I live that way for 20 years or 30 years. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to live with this narrative anymore. And I'm going to access courage and spontaneity. And I'm going to, skydive.
Skydive, yeah.
Skydive out of an airplane, right? So for 20 or 30 years, my narrative is saying, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. Well, then I access courage and I take a new committed action, jump out of the airplane. The next time my narrative or my mind, my limited belief says, I can't do that, my experience says, I just did. All of a sudden, it starts to diminish or weaken the old narrative. And little by little, that's why we're talking those 1%, mastering the mundane, new committed actions, put purpose to the protocol, put purpose to the mundane. Those new committed actions consistently over time begin to diminish the old narratives that were trapping us.
That's so good.
I mean, think about it, even in relationships. Like if I have narratives in relationships that are, what I used to do is I used to implode relationships. And then I remember after my divorce, I remember saying, I will never put myself or someone else through this again. And so I had to really focus on what was my participation in that? Where was I withholding honesty and truth and vulnerability and courage, just to keep things copacetic or, placate or acquiesce. And so now, and little by little, those took honest communications with my ex, with my wife, little by little, it generates a whole new relationship. It's not just, one shot and you're done. It's little by little accessing those new states, those new committed actions, those new inspired actions, and they start to diminish those old narratives.
What about, I love that right there, the old narratives, because I think sometimes in our society, we're go, we're on these things all the time, the dream killers, we're just, it's like, it's unbelievable. And I think there's more of a stress and an anxiety that lives at this time, maybe than ever. And I think sometimes when you have that stress or anxiety, you might want to go back and think like, man, why do I feel anxious? And I think sometimes we default to, it was my upbringing. It was my mom and dad's fault. It was, this coach's fault down the road. He didn't treat me right. And I've always been struggling ever since. Can you talk about that a little bit, like about the blame game? I feel like sometimes it's so easy, instead of taking action for yourself, changing your behaviors, actually doing things differently. It's easy to say, you know what? It's his fault. It's my dad's fault. It's my mom's fault. It's my coach's fault, right? Or it's my divorce's fault. My ex sucks and she's the reason why. That I'm anxious like I am.
There's a fixed mindset in there, which comes down to perspective. So we've been talking about narratives, we've been talking about belief systems, we've been talking about behaviors. There's another part of context, which is your perspective. So a simple equation is perspective generates perception, meaning where I see from generates what I see. So if you think about, we're all on the East Coast here. If I, go out to the beach and I see the sun on the horizon, and I'm facing east, I know it's a sunrise because the perspective of east is what gives what I look at meaning. But if I'm on the West Coast and I go to the beach and I see the sun on the horizon, I know that it's a sunset. The sun isn't even moving, but the perspective, if I see from the east, I'm going to see a sunrise. If I see from the west, I'm going to see a sunset. So perspective generates perception. Where I see from generates what I see. So one perspective is the perspective of victim. So if I see from the perspective of victim, everything I see is going to be blame. It's their fault. It's my fault. It's X, Y, or Z's fault. Now, here's the thing. Deeper than that, perspective generates perception, which generates experience. So if I see from the perspective of victim, I will generate the experience of powerlessness. I will always feel powerless because even if it's my old coach's or parents' fault, I'm giving them all the power over my existence and my life here and now. Even if that was 20, 30, 40 years ago, I'm now giving away power to my history, to my parents, to my upbringing, to that coach, to my ex, to X, Y, or Z. And the perspective of victim, you have the right to choose it. It's your free will as a human being. But here's my reminder. If you choose that perspective of victim, you're always going to feel powerless. Just know that that perspective is going to generate that experience. You have the right to choose it, but you can't escape the law of cause and effect. You can't see from victim and experience an empowered life. It'll never work. The context is totally out. Now, on the other spectrum of that is accountability, personal responsibility. That's the opposite. That's owning your participation. That's owning your full experience. That's saying, hey, everything that happens in my life, it's either happening to support me, to grow me, to influence me, to give me power, inspiration, or a new way of thinking. Now, all of a sudden, if I'm seeing from the perspective of accountability and responsibility, I'm now saying that whatever happens to me in my life, whatever happened to me in my life, it was actually for my benefit of growth, that there was an element of possibility in it, something I could learn, some new way of character or being that I could access, or a new way of acting and a new inspired action. Because if you think of it this way, from a place of responsibility, look back on your life to all the hardest moments. From a place of responsibility, you'll see that's where I built the majority of my character. That's where I gained the majority of my insight. That's where the river of my life consciously changed and corrected and improved. That's where I learned this. That's where I started to access this. That's when I started to choose this. From a place of responsibility, you'll actually look back on the hardest moments of your life and call them a gift. But from the place of victim, you'll look back on the hardest points of your life and you'll say, that's what screwed me up.
Right.
I mean, it's all a perspective.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, nothing in your history changes. It's all gone. None of it changes. The only thing that changes is your perspective and interpretation about it. That's it. Like that. It'll never change. It just is. It's gone. It's over. So if I look at my history from the perspective of victim, it's going to create powerlessness. But if I look at it from personal responsibility, it's going to create power. And then power is the ability to influence outcomes, behaviors, and a course of events. So now from a place of power, I could look back on my history and say that hard time empowered me because I either learned something, accessed something in my own way of being internally, or I chose a new action that inspired me. Well, there you go. That's a gift.
That's a gift. Yeah. Wow. You talk about power too. I always think about, having the power of all the things that you put in as an athlete when you're on the field and you're performing, right? And I love I don't know if you've seen it on ESPN Plus, is Tom Brady's, it's called Man in the Arena. Yeah. And I love that it's called Man in the Arena. Was that Roosevelt's? Somebody has the Man in the Arena, it's not the critic, and that little piece is amazing. And we always talk about, I think sometimes on social media nowadays too, like you put a post up or something and somebody comes and they say, you're an asshole and you're this and you're that and blah, blah, blah. And we always talk about not losing sleep on spectators, you know what I mean? And I knew for me being in the arena at times, you know what I mean? And embarrassing things happen. Like we always talk about, I got thrown out from left field the one time. I look back now and I say, man, what a cool way to look at it, to change the perspective of being embarrassed to saying, man, when you make it to the big leagues and you put yourself out there, you're going to have embarrassing moments. It's part of the process. You're going to have failure, things that don't work out for you, right? But it really doesn't matter at the end of the day what anyone says. It's an experience that you had that you can draw and draw strength from. So what do you think about that, Mikey? Just about not losing sleep on spectators, people that aren't in the arena.
Yeah. So, I mean, that you put it well, and the simple formula I put that in is never solicit feedback from spectators. Only solicit feedback from people in the arena with you that are willing to bleed, willing to sweat, willing to cry, willing to fail, and willing to pick themselves back up. So what happens is now that becomes an inner circle, because that is not the majority. So here's good feedback. If you realize, wow, there's no one in the arena with me, like, okay, you need to go find those people. You need to get in that tribe. Because what'll happen is, if we think of it this way, if I'm in a dead-end job and I ask the guy next to me in the next cubicle over, the man or the woman in the cubicle over, hey, this is the dream I have and what I want to do, he or she is going to give me all the limitations and all the excuses of why I can't do it. Because here's the thing, they're not doing it. So if I'm in a dead end job and I want to create my dream job, I want to get into the arena and I want to solicit feedback from someone that has done what I desire to do. They've either accomplished what I desire to do, or they're in the process of accomplishing it. So if I'm in a struggling in my marriage, I don't want to solicit feedback from other guys that are miserable in their marriage too.
Right.
I want to solicit feedback from someone who was in a struggling marriage and now it's thriving. Oh, what did you do? I want your feedback. You were willing to do it. You were willing to bleed and sweat and cry and fail and learn and get back up. What did you do? So that's a very small fraction of the population. So we've got to first distinguish, am I soliciting feedback from spectators, or am I actually soliciting feedback from people that are in the arena?
Wow. Yeah.
Men and women that are in the arena, that are willing to grow, willing to sacrifice, willing to fail, willing to learn, willing to adjust and pivot and evolve forward. And now here's the other thing. It's like, and that's just something I live by, a mantra I live by, is you're never going to be criticized by someone who's doing more than you.
I like that.
You're not. You're like, here's the thing. The people that are critiquing, getting thrown out from left, yeah, they're sitting in the they're sitting in the stands on their third hot dog and fourth beer. You're not going to have someone that you look up to, like a player that you looked up to in your time, be like, and criticize you about that. There's no way.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you said that.
Teddy Roosevelt, by the way. Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt, man in the arena. Yeah. It's funny you said that Jim Tomey was the first guy. The next day was like, man, it was like such an empathetic moment with him. Like, hey, man, that could have happened to anybody. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And it's like, I know what happened to me. But he was like, you could tell he was like, man, we're all out here. That could actually happen to any of us. And that doesn't look like a good thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But if you know what, as a perspective, I love your example of that. It's like, here's the thing, and this is what I learned, after going through all the struggles and challenges of my life. I would rather 10 minutes in the arena than a lifetime in the stands. Like if I look back on my life, I'm like, nah, you know what? I would rather come to the end of my life and look back and be like, I left it all in the arena. I left it all out there in my marriage. I left it all out there in my purpose, in my impact, in my career. Like I was willing to fail. I was willing to mess up. I was willing to learn, but at least I die on empty. At least I give all the gifts that I have, rather than, yeah, you know what? I'm at the end of my life and I'm like, I was going to dive into the life I really wanted to live, but the timing was never really right. Like, no, man, that's not going to be me. There's no way that'll be me. And if you think there's this great perspective that I always consider is, there was a study done years ago. They researched like a few thousand people, and they said, look back in your life and find a moment that you wish never happened. Everyone thought back in their life, like, all right, I wish this never happened. And like, okay, great. You can erase that moment, but you have to erase all the moments that came after it that was generated by. And 99% of people said, I wouldn't erase it.
Wow.
99%. Because when you start to look at, wait, that wasn't a place in my life that I was a victim. That was a place in my life that showed me another option, another opportunity, another possibility. And you know what? This is what opened up from that. This is what I learned. This is how I grew. This is what I accessed. This is what I started to commit to. Like, I look back at the most painful moments in my life. I'm like, thank God.
Wow,
thank God they happened, because I wouldn't have had gained that perspective. I wouldn't have gained that new skill set, that new emotional IQ, that new commitment.
Right.
You think of it that way, and you're like, so look back at those challenging moments in your life that were actually a gift.
I'll take it all. Yeah, I'll take it all.
Take it all.
I want to. I got one more question for you. Then we do this fun thing called 9 and 90. But I one of the things I love that you had talked about was the two wolves story.
Yeah.
Can you tell us that story, because that is so good.
That's an old. I have a lot of my upbringing when I was telling you guys about, like, doing a lot of introspection when I was young. I got really into Native American philosophies and traditions and ceremonies. And the story of the two wolves it's credited to an old Cherokee story. And there's an old story that says there's a grandfather and a grandson sitting by a river. And the grandfather says to his grandson, inside all of us, there are two wolves. One is the wolf of darkness. It's the wolf of pride, of ego, of greed, of jealousy, of gluttony, and of competition. And there's another wolf inside us. It's the wolf of light. It's the wolf of generosity, of compassion, of love, of excellence, and of togetherness. And these two wolves are always at war with each other inside every man and inside every woman. And the grandson takes a little moment, some time, and finally he looks at his grandfather and he says, "Grandfather, how will I know which wolf wins?" And the grandfather looks at his grandson and says, "The wolf that wins is the wolf you feed." Huh. And so what happens is, like, there's all of this in all of us, but where I choose to put my focus, where I choose to put my mastery, where I choose to put my commitments, where I choose to put my perspectives and my power, that's going to determine which wolf wins. Like, I have both wolves in me. And for a lot of my life, the dark wolf was winning. It was winning, man. There's no way around it. It was winning. And now these challenging moments in life allow us, or give us, the opportunity to shift our focus. You know what? That wolf's winning, man. And here's why it's winning. I keep feeding it. I keep feeding my jealousy. I keep feeding my greed. I keep feeding my limitations. I keep feeding my fears and my doubts. I keep feeding all that. Well, yeah, you keep feeding that contextually. That's the wolf that's going to win. But it's the beauty of human being. We always have a choice. We always have a choice to shift our focus, shift our perspective, shift our power, and say, like, today I'm going to feed this wolf. Today I'm going to feed this wolf. I'm going to feed this wolf of light. I'm going to feed my compassion. I'm going to feed my generosity. I'm going to feed my, courage instead of my doubt. I'm going to feed this wolf today. And now you feed that wolf over and over and over again, consistently over time, and stay committed to it. Remember, it's not big results don't only come from big efforts. They come from small efforts, consciously, consistently over time. Yes. So that's always the question. What's the wolf I'm feeding?
Yeah, every day, moment by moment, action by action, behavior by behavior. What wolf am I feeding? And all of a sudden, you're like, wow. If I'm feeding the wolf that I want, that I want to feed, that light wolf, all of a sudden I look at my life and go, man, the content in my life, the environment that I've created, man, it really it's a lot more peaceful than the one I used to feed.
Congruent.
And it's one thing I've found, Mikey, it's an everyday thing. This isn't like you don't figure it out. You don't read a book and go, "Hey, I got it." You don't go to a weekend. You don't go to a weekend. Retreat and go, "Yes, I'm good." You come back from that retreat, or you come back from out from that book. You take things and you take action. You do it every single day, and you master the mundane of your morning routine. You master the mundane of your kindness to your kids, to your marriage, to your job, and all that stuff. I think that's one of the biggest things is I've taken from this conversation that I've always taken from you is that what are you doing every day to feed the wolf that gives you back peace and love and all that stuff?
And you're absolutely accurate. It's day by day. It's meal by meal.
Yeah.
So the wolves are hungry right now. Which one? The wolves are hungry right now. Which one are you going to feed? Oh, you know what? This part, going back to Rich's example, like this person's upset with. What wolf am I going to feed right now? You know what? There's conflict in my marriage. Which wolf am I going to feed? Hey, you know what? I'm hungry. There's junk food or there's health. Which wolf am I going to feed? Like it's meal by meal, moment by moment, choice by choice. But that's the beauty. Exactly what you just said is you feed that wolf of light over and over again for days, weeks, months, decades. You start to be like, wow, I started all the way back there. Look at where I am now. And that was meal by meal.
Yeah. Wow.
Meal by meal.
Yeah. It pops in the last thing, you create your habits and your habits create you. If you start creating those kind of habits that every day, all of a sudden you're like, well, man, interesting. That's just see how this works. Results aren't random. Shit really works. You know what I mean? It's unbelievable. Hey, Mikey, we do this last thing it's called 9 and 90. Rich will ask me a question, and they're just fun questions, and then I'll answer, then you'll answer.
Yeah.
All right, go for it.
Cool. You just pick up right where he leaves off.
Hall of Fame baseball broadcaster Marty Brenneman here. It's time for 9 in 90, the most ridiculous segment in all of sports.
All right, first one, Case. Would you rather be good at fixing cars or fixing computers?
You know what? I think nowadays I'd be good at better at fixing computers because I feel like they're all going to electric cars here soon, and we're going to be in trouble. I won't be able to fix it. You're going to need Elon Musk to fix all the cars.
What do you think?
I'm going fixing cars. I'm not a car guy, but at least I could do it outside. I feel like get outside, pop the hood, whatever. I'm going fixing cars.
All right, Case. One of your kids comes home, says they want to quit school and become a stand-up comedian. What is your response?
Hey, man, if that's what you want to do, go for it. But don't come call me for money if you freaking fall flat in your face.
It's funny. My answer would be like, if my kid said that, I'd be like, how much you need? Let's do it. Let's go.
That's awesome. All right, Case. Which of these would you rather have as a pet? An owl or a rooster?
Oh, my God. Well, I think owls they're a little better than roosters are so annoying. I was just at my buddy's place in Austin. He had a rooster. I'm like, are we going to have to deal with that all day long? I don't think they don't just do the rooster thing in the morning. They do it all day. So I'll take the owl.
I'm seconding that, owl. And here's the strange thing. In Miami, the first house my wife and I ever lived in, we had property. And I dug a fire pit in the backyard. And every time we light a fire, this owl would come out and hang out with us. So I feel like I've kind of already
had one already.
Owl as a pet. And roosters are annoying. I'm not going with that.
Nice. All right, Case, I think I know the answer to this one for you. Packed house parties. Exciting or stressful? Which wolf?
Packed house parties in my 20s, exciting. Now, very stressful. Very stressful.
There's an asterisk to this one. It's got to be a DeSanti cooking for me. So I love hosting and cooking for people. So that's limited. The house could be full, that's fine. But everyone there needs to have a good appetite and love food. So it's not like a house drinking party, it's a house feasting party. So that's what my asterisk on that.
Nice.
So it's exciting for me.
Good. Let us know when the next one is.
Yeah,
me and Rich
we're
want to
coming.
be invited.
We'll be there.
Down, man. Come down.
All right, Case, rank these candies from worst to best. Kit Kat, Snickers, Butterfinger.
Oh, I'm going to have to go Butterfinger, Kit Kat, Snickers is my favorite, bro. Okay, I don't eat them a lot, I really ever eat them nowadays, but I have one in the freezer sitting there for the last 3 months just in case I get a Snickers craving. I got to do it.
I haven't had, dude, this is no joke. I haven't had a candy bar since 2010.
Oh, what a commitment.
I know. However, I'm going same ranking. I don't think Butterfingers should even still exist. I remember thinking those were terrible. Kit Kat is great. It's delicious. It's just candy to me. Snickers is number one because I remember when I was young, I could convince myself because of the peanuts.
It's good for you.
It was like a meal, right? Like, like a Snickers for lunch.
I'm like, at least there's peanuts. I got some protein in it. So that was my justification.
I did the same thing.
Good.
All right. Oh, speaking of meals, are you more likely to finish a big meal even though you know you're going to be feeling it all night, or take home a doggy bag and crush your leftovers later?
Nowadays, and this is just like two different worlds, but before, just crush as much as I could, come home and just feel like total ass and like, oh my God, I feel so sick. Now I look at it and say, no, I'm going to take that home because I don't want to feel sick.
God bless you. When I was young, I'd finish it, feel sick, and I'd ask for a doggy bag to go home. I thought there would be another one. Back in the day when I used to just overdo it. Now, no, I'm finishing it.
Nice.
Leftovers don't exist in my house. I would speed up through it again.
There's people starving in the world, Mikey. There's people starving in the world. Eat your pasta.
Yeah.
Somehow, me eating to gluttony helps, those starving.
There you go. All right, two more. Eliminate one of these forever, Sean. Hip-hop music, country music, or pop music?
You know what? Probably. What's considered pop? Is that like 80s? Because if we get rid of the 80s, that's I need the 80s, and that was like.
Let's go like I don't know, Taylor Swift, stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
Didn't mean to call her out personally, but
you know what? I like a little 90s hip hop still, and and I also like, was it country? Was the other one?
Yeah.
Yeah, country, classic rock. So I'm probably pop music. I'm not a huge pop music guy.
Right.
Yeah,
I know DeSanti loves pop music, so.
I mean, listen, I love 90s hip hop. Grew up on 90s.
Yeah.
Yes, the best.
Hip hop. And then, but I'm not a country fan. I mean, I'm like a kid from Jersey. Like I travel the country. So I'm going country music because I really don't even have a reference point to it. So it's really there'd be no loss in my life.
Perfect. Last one. Especially, I like this one because you got that nice view down in Miami right there. Sean, is it okay to wear white after Labor Day? Yes or no?
Yeah, I think so. I've never even thought of that ever in my life, Chinch, but I think so.
That's like a snobby statement anyway.
Yeah, what do you live in the Hamptons or something, bro?
I am from Long Island, but it's a big deal around here.
That's a thing, but that's a thing up north. Down in Miami, bro, it's white year-round.
It's white 12 months a year.
There you go.
It's different, like white months. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't.
Oh my gosh!
All right,
so
that was
good,
it.
man.
We
Dude,
survived 9 and 90.
Well, you know what I was thinking. Yesterday, I got a quick story to roll us out of here. Yesterday, I was just back home. I was gone for the week working, and I came back, had my daughters, and I was dropping my one daughter off at her friend's house, and then I realized, oh my God, I got 5 miles of gas left, but I could get there. You know what I mean? So like, I drop her off. I've never had this happen before. I start pulling out. It goes to 0, and it goes refuel immediately. And I'm like, I'm not really that close to the Sunoco that's on my brain right now. I actually have to get there. I'm a few miles away. So, talk about like, just being anti-fragile confidence where you're like, all right, if I run out of gas, I run out of gas. But here's the deal. I started to think, who am I going to call? Who am I going to call when I run out of gas? And there was a guy named Ryan Johns, who's a good buddy of mine who I love to death. So what I did was I took my car this back route to Sunoco, knowing that if I ran out of gas, Ryan Johns was right down the street. I could give him a call, and I end up literally coasting into, I put it in neutral. I coast into the gas station. First time. I've always heard stories of people saying they do that. I actually did it last night, right? I coast on in. And it made me think, though, of people that you would call and all that stuff. And I just had this analogy pop into my head. when you run out of gas in life, you know what I mean? When you're kind of back's against the wall, I always think, you become the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most or that are in your life. And I thought to myself, you know what? Thank God that, what times when I run out of gas in life, I got Michael DeSanti, who's 93 premium. You know what I mean? He's not like 87 with, he's 93 premium. I give DeSanti a call. I'm like, bro, I need to fill up the gas tank. So, brother, so grateful for your time. So grateful for your wisdom. So grateful for our friendship. How can our viewers find you, brother? How can they get more of Michael DeSanti out there?
Oh, I so appreciate you. I so appreciate that analogy, your time. And Rich, it's great spending time with you. You can find me on michaeldesanti.com. You could follow me on Instagram at Mike_DeSanti, and you could find my book, New Man Emerging, on Amazon.
Okay, man. There you go. And
you can also find Find Your Tribe, the men's online group. That's on michaeldesanti.com. And then you can find the retreats in Montana on thevitalguide.com. Those are sold out for a while, but give me a message and we'll get you on the way.
Awesome.
Yeah, get on it fast. And I did that. Find Your Tribe. That's was our first, really engagement. DeSanti and I, and that is a life-changing course. So anyone that's listening out there, check that out. Find Your Tribe. And if you don't check it out soon, like you said, he's already selling out trips to Montana, all that stuff. We'll be next time we try and get him on the podcast, I'll be like, nah, he's booked. Go to the Michael DeSanti calendar. We can't even get a hold of the guy. You know what I mean? So. Bro, thanks a lot, man. I love you tons, man. And I will. I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you so much. Great to see you.
Okay, man. See you, buddy. What'd you think, Chinchy? He's my man right there.
I mean, really cool, really relatable. Sometimes, you and I have talked about this a lot. Where it's like I feel like I need stuff like that in my life, but I'm just as much of like the skeptic, and I'm glad he answered that question the way he did. But there's a lot of people probably listening who are like, oh, I don't know, these people don't do anything. It's like, like in the 80s, everybody's like, oh, you don't go see a head shrink. You're weak if you do that, whatever. The more I've grown up and the more I evolved, I guess, in my mind and going through life, you're like, no, you need to kind of like take a step back and like assess yourself. And he just seems like such an amazingly relatable guy. And I really appreciated talking to him today, to be honest.
Yeah, dude, he's been awesome, man. He's been a guy that's helped me out in these last few years, especially for me, like getting divorced and going through some tough times. And, I felt like some dark days at times, getting perspective back, getting gratitude back, knowing that, like, creating new routines and new habits and stuff like that. I just love the guy, man. I think, I hope our listeners today really dove into some of the stuff he was saying, because I think it's so true. We all, at times, we can just the familiar, that's just who I am. That's what I am. It's like, now, like, we all have to look at and be aware of what content we're creating in our lives and go, you know what? That's what I've always said. It's such a limiting belief. I'm going to start a tiny habit today and start changing it. If I want to start, I want to get in better shape. All right, do 1 push-up a day for the next 2 weeks and see where next thing that 1 turns to 2, turns to 10, turns to 20, turns you got a gym membership, turns you're working out, turns you got good energy. You know what I mean? Like, man, I want to start eating better. Okay, maybe I mix in a salad instead of like wings one time, and I mix in a salad daily. You know what I mean? So I just love this stuff. It's amazing.
I love the 2 wolves.
He's an amazing guy.
I love the wolves.
Yeah,
I'm using that. My wolves are constantly fighting. They're constantly fighting inside.
Everyone's wolf is constantly fighting. But the more you feed the good wolf, the more that becomes. Oh, wow, that feels good. You know what I mean? So
I like that.
But that was great, man. I love how I know for me, a mindset was such a huge part of my career. Perspective was so big, and it's even more so now as I get older and I have my 4 kids, and in a new relationship and growing and becoming being the best version of myself. We all evolve as human beings, and it's fun, man. It's almost like the game of life now, the mental game of life instead of the mental game of baseball.
Great idea bringing him on.
So,
great idea.
Cool, man. All right, Chinchy, brother. I love you, man, and I will see you. I'll see you at the Synopsis Awards.
Yes, let's go.
Yes, bro. Let's go. All right, man. Cheers, all the people out there. Thank you so much for listening. We see the numbers growing. We're appreciative. Keep sharing us everywhere you can. If you can, like us, download us, subscribe to us on all the platforms, your podcast. Come watch us on YouTube too if you want to watch the show. And Chinchy, I love you, man. I'll talk to you soon.